So every single toilet in the Trump Tower is gold, or is that just the one
I
you
know the
just...
ones in Florida are, and then like I think I showed you the pictures that I had, but I couldn't get past the barricades this morning. Like I don't know what's going on, but it's like I don't know. I guess everyone wants to go down and hang out today. I don't know what's happening.
Huh. That's yeah, the stories about Mar-a-Lago are fascinating. It's no
My
doubt.
experiences have been very rich
Yeah,
there. They're
yeah. Can't say I've ever
surreal
used a
is
gold
another word.
toilet. Welcome everyone to the potty humor of Coffee Talk with Serge. We're really excited to be here today. I'm Ryan Kovar, Mick Baccio, Audra Streetman, and as always, we're here for 30 to 45-ish plus-ish minutes of potty humor and discussions around cybersecurity. So we're pretty excited to bring it today. We're going to be going over some ransomware, which is always exciting and never ending. We're going to talk about BreachForums and what happens there. I'm a proud Pixel user, but maybe I'm not going to be cropping my images anymore, that's for sure. We're going to talk about a little thing we like to talk about called RSA, all the stuff we're doing there. We're going to go into the 0 days from Microsoft, and we're going to finish off with a rousing discussion about our second favorite subject after ransomware, which of course is generative
Burners.
AI. Oh, yeah, toilets. ChatGPT. So join us. We're excited, but let's start off with the news. Ali, roll clip.
All right. Well, hopefully my audio works out okay. I noticed my video was a little all over the place, so I apologize in advance. Let me know if I drop out. But first news story, like you said, Ryan, ransomware is always a headline with Coffee Talk. So we wanted to start with Oakland. Apparently, is dealing with a possible second ransomware attack in 2 months. So the city actually declared a state of emergency last month in February due to an attack that was claimed by the Play ransomware group. And then just overnight, Lockbit posted on their leak site that they had targeted Oakland as well, and now they're trying to demand a ransom. It's unclear if Oakland has paid any ransoms in either attack. And I haven't seen confirmation yet from the city about that. I think this is only based on the leak sites. But, talk about hitting someone when they're down, right? 2 ransomware attacks back to back. That's a
Yeah,
lot.
I'm a little shocked by this. My understanding of ransomware was that once you got it, you couldn't get it again for 3 to 6 months. I thought that was the most recent research.
That's a different virus. It's a different
It's hard
one.
to keep up with the inoculations. Like how many updates have I had to my semantic lately? It's really brutal.
Well, I still use McAfee, so that works for me. It's just I like dead products basically. It's really it's concerning when you look at the scope and gravity of ransomware, right? Like you said, this just happened, and I feel so bad. Like hug ups to all the admins and the IT staff and just all the folks supporting the infrastructure. We all have that gallows humor at times when we're like, "Hey, man, things could be worse." And in fact, that's actually what happened here. They got worse. It's just you didn't recover, and then you're like, "But no, I just got the email working." So again, I don't want to sound like the old guy yelling at the cloud, but I think ransomware attacks against education systems, K-12 and universities, have to be elevated to a national response. It's great that we're tracking these and we're noticing the frequency of them, but until there's a coordinated response to kind of combat that and disrupt it, I think we're going to keep seeing it.
I was heartened. We spent a lot of time this last week, myself and one of my colleagues, Katie Brown, and I know, Mick, you've been working on a blog as well around the national cybersecurity strategy that came out from the Biden-Harris administration. And one of the pillars, if you haven't read it, is around disrupting and dismantling actors, networks, and the resiliency. And then they explicitly call out ransomware several times. And I do wonder at what point, like, you can make an argument that America has a laissez-faire attitude towards the protection of corporations, right? That it's not something that the government's going to get too involved with all the time. But certainly there's an interesting argument to be made around protecting the government, right? Like, so although we have a federalized system and like this, the city of Oakland falls under the California state government, at what point is this really going to be, hey, when you target Oakland, you are targeting President Biden.
Right. I think that's also, why we're seeing more than one government implement a state of emergency so that they can expedite resources in order to more effectively respond. Because especially if we talk a lot about resiliency with ransomware, and if they aren't able to get back up and running fairly quickly, that could have a cascading effect with whether it's 911 operators or whether it's filing taxes or any sort of government service that could be negatively impacted. From what I've seen, that the original ransomware attack targeting Oakland didn't have any major effect in terms of 911 being down, for instance. But like I said, I haven't seen much yet about the impact of the second possible attack by Lockbit.
Yeah, the first one was more extortion, right? It was PII that they were going to send out. But I think one of the articles I read said it's the ransomware this time has impacted 311, which is the information. So a lot of elderly people are upset to find that they can't determine when their trash pickup has changed.
Is 311 information?
Yeah, it's
in
information
Oakland?
like when's my trash going? Is the community pool open?
All right.
Can you
In
remove the
Baltimore,
dead
311 is where you go to file like all the things, like your services through the city are filed through 311.
Yeah.
We had a not ransomware related, surprisingly, here in Dallas, but there's actually a pretty popular Reddit post you might have seen where someone had a parking ticket and they tried to go online to pay their parking ticket and the website was down and they said, go to your local, county office. So they went to the county office and then they had a sign saying, we are unable to take credit card or cash or Bitcoin. You must pay by personal check only. And of course, that actually violates several federal laws around, you have to be able to take U.S. currency as a thing.
Right.
It is an interesting knock-on effect. Some of these, not ransomware that we know of, but certainly I'm sure they're going to be dealing with these sort of things of, the knock-on effects of unavailability also then impedes citizens' ability to do life. How does that work?
Well, that when you move into the concept of smart cities, then if any cog in that wheel goes down, your city isn't very smart anymore. So, again, I'm curious what happens at a national level if there is some kind of coordinated response or an escalation of a response to, like if it was a colonial pipeline, if there's that scope of, hey, we need to respond to these actors.
Do you think there's a future where, and I'm not, maybe this already exists with FEMA, but when the hurricane exists, and I know they did a state of emergency here, but what could you actually do to help them, right? At some point, you can pour money in, but technology problem's a technology problem. You could send cyber protection teams from CISA or the NSA, but
when I was at HHS and they, an emergency happened, we helped ASPR coordinate that response where there are
HHS
doctors.
Is Human Health Services and ASPR
the Department of Health and Human Services. So let's say there's a national disaster. ASPR, the Preparedness Resources Office, is an operating division underneath that. There are volunteer doctors all over the U.S. that when something happens, they just get spun up, right? We turned on their credentials, did some small vetting, and they get dropped in. And it'd be that same concept. Where
so
again,
we'd be issued letters of marque to go do cybering in Oakland?
That's exactly, yes. I know all the cyber nerds out there. Just, oh my God, finally, it's our moment. But no, you're going to do IT admin work. Because to your point, you can throw all the money you want at it, but it's just that problem of who's going to do it.
I volunteer to go out with Chris Sanders and make barbecue in the parking lot for the IT staff, personally.
I volunteer to go with Rick Holland to do the same thing.
You haven't ate his barbecue. It's not worth it.
Ouch.
Ouch. All right, next news story. So this one, BreachForums is apparently shutting down. This is according to a TechCrunch article. So last week, the FBI arrested a man named Connor Brian Fitzpatrick, who they believe is Pom Pom Purin, I believe that's how you say it, which is the administrator of BreachForums. And so he's actually accused of conspiracy to commit device fraud. And so there's a new administrator now who's taken over the forum. And at first, this administrator said, we're going to keep going. But recently, they announced on the Telegram channel that they are actually taking down the forum. And the quote from the current administrator, whose name is Baphomet, says that, that they can assume nothing is safe anymore, is basically what they said. So this is, BreachForums was created after Raid Forums was taken down. So we'll see if a new one pops up in its place.
Nature abhors a vacuum. I think one of the other notes that I caught from the article that Baphomet, the new admin, also said was, hey, you know what? My OPSEC is good from day one. I am okay. I got nothing. I'm fine. So that is going to be one of those evergreen tweets we look back on. It's just, oh no, Buddha's name be praised. What are you thinking, guy?
It's okay,
no one's
because if I remember
OPSEC is
correctly,
great.
Baphomet is a god or something that the Knights Templar prayed to. So we're really looping it all in. They're fine. They
Yeah.
have the powers of the Knights Templar, which were disbanded by King Louis the 12th or something like that in the 14th century. So we're good.
Yeah. All right. Well, history is repeating itself apparently.
Baphomet's the cat with the hooves. Yeah.
I've always found these forums to be fascinating. Like when the internet never forgets, and you can always pivot. And looking at these things, I do always think about people who've worked or published. Like you look at the Silk Road and people getting busted 10, 15 years later as the FBI kind of slowly but surely works through every posting and starts finding and oh, that one time that you published something on Reddit for Secret Santa with your same username and you got your Secret Santa gift in 2008, but now that username is linked to the Breach forum and now they can find where you are. It is so hard. When we do Boss of the Sock, I remember we emulate the adversary, and one of the years I screwed up and I posted something on VirusTotal using my username, my personal username, which people were watching for. And it meant one of the hardest questions for Boss of the Sock, somebody answered in about 45 seconds because they'd already ripped apart my infrastructure using my name that I made one submission on. And that was it. And adversaries have the same thing. You see this all the time. And it's so easy to, post from your personal account by accident, something on your work account, back and forth. You have to have so much diligence not to screw up. And it's not easy.
Well, it's not, it's not just you screwing up. Okay. It's that, sure, that principle holds true, but in any criminal enterprise, it's an enterprise because you have more than one person. So are they doing all the same things you are, and so on down the line? There was Dread Pirate Roberts who, oh, I'm secure. There's a VPN, and then the VPN's not. It takes one link in that chain, and all your OPSEC is gone. If you're not following the Grug on social media, look at a lot of his posts, a lot of his talks previously on OPSEC cover a lot of this. Just you think you're secure, you are not. You're not at all, and it depends who the adversary is.
Audra, you're the privacy nerd on this little team here. I know from my work that we used to see this all the time with APT actors would be super good at VPN, and then there'd be a network hiccup, and they didn't realize that their VPN dropped for an hour or 30 minutes or 5 minutes, and suddenly I have a whole new set of user agent strings, a different IP address, but it's very obviously the same session, and we could pivot off that. From your view, if you are running per se, just throwing it out there, Baphomet, if you were running a criminal enterprise for some of these things, what would you be looking at for personal protection against the feds?
Well,
not that you've thought about this or currently working on it,
just a nervous laugh over here. What a crazy
What
idea.
is in your cyber prepper kit? I guess is what we're asking. It's
I mean, there's a lot of things that you could do to try to have two separate identities, right? You have your criminal identity and you have your own identity, because everyone has their own life online, and keeping those two completely separate would be very challenging. Like you said, with IP addresses and even, using a Tor network, I feel like that's a whole nother interesting thing with exit nodes and how you can track using that. So you could go down a rabbit hole on how easy it is to ultimately, it depends on how determined and how well resourced you are, right?
Okay, so big question here. We talk a lot with some of the boys and gals over at Mystic around these takedowns. Do they actually matter? Right. And okay, breach forum is gone. The roaches have scuttled off to the darker holes. Is it just now there isn't a place for us to have easy telemetry, or is this actually going to be impactful and reduce breaches? Discuss. Coffee talk.
Well, I said this before at when we were in Vegas for the last show, that I think name and shame has its place. I think that it does serve a purpose. It may not be as effective as you might want it to be, but I do think putting someone's name out there and identifying them as this is the admin of this very well-known hacking forum, I do think that can instill fear, and it can instill paranoia, just like how they're taking down the forum, right? Like that's an impact.
Right.
If this arrest hadn't happened, that forum would still be up and running. So,
But if it was running, they could be all up in their business and disrupting a lot more things as they know where all the info's coming from. Mick, your thoughts?
What was the website? It was like way back. It was Operation Ghost Click. It was a thing Microsoft and a whole bunch of organizations teamed up and, solved the DDoS problem. So, mission accomplished, right? I think all the efforts are fantastic, but it's that game of whack-a-mole that I think is never ending. So while the takedowns are great, nature abhors a vacuum, right? Someone's always going to step up to, oh, hey, look, I threw together this WordPress site. And in some instances, that may be a federal agency that runs the forum now. But, there's always going to be an avenue for criminals to, be criminals. That's just how being a criminal works. Whether it's some hotel in a movie or some online forum, there's always going to be an administrator of it. So I think, where one gets taken down, another will pop up. So what we've seen, throwing it back to the national cybersecurity strategy, is the administrators will be arrested and targeted and indicted, things like that. But it's the providers and the ones that give them resources. So I think the actual hosting of the forum itself will get moved around a lot more. And I think that disrupts the infrastructure.
Part of the national cybersecurity was putting an onus on the owners of data, right? And so this is interesting because you could make the argument like the government isn't doing enough to help me, an owner of data. Well, here's an example where they have, and so now they don't have the ability to complain as much anymore, right? That's an interesting point. I haven't gone through both of those are although I am fascinated, Audra, that you're a breach shamer. So that's going in your CV now. I don't think it's going to change, but I don't think it's a bad thing they did this. And at least from our experience working with a lot of federal law enforcement officers, by the time they do a big bust like this, there's the Coventry problem, right? Like you have to extract as much intel as possible before you burn it. And my guess is at this point, there is a reason why they did it. I know in Australia a couple of years ago, there was that great case where they actually took over like an encrypted chat service that they were then promoting with criminals within Australia. And so they were actually the ones, like, it wasn't Signal, but it was something like Signal that was being used extensively by criminals. And they were hosting the entire service, if I remember correctly. And they only got rid of it when they realized, like, oh, someone's onto us. So they burned down the entire network and arrested like 100 or 200 people. So hopefully that was similar.
Yeah. And just to point out, Jessica Chambers on LinkedIn posted in the chat asking about a service called Incogni, which is one of those data broker removal sites. And I haven't used it, but I believe it's owned by the same company that runs Delete Me, which is a similar service. I think I'd have to check on that. So yeah, if that's something that you're concerned about in terms of removing your data online, I would definitely think that's a good
and that's a great point. We're getting a lot of great comments in. So hello to everyone. We see some folks from New Zealand. Hi, Neil. You should definitely come up with a way to get us all out there.
I'm curious, like, does it just go through... I'm curious how thorough that would be. Like forum posts, on now... I had a GeoCities page. I'm sure it's archived somewhere, right? Does it go through archives and ask for that removal as well?
With archive data, I think they have a list of just like hundreds of data brokers. I think there are maybe 300 some that they track, and they just repeatedly, because it is whack-a-mole with that as well. You remove your data, 6 months later it can come back up. So that's why it's beneficial to pay for these services, because they're constantly monitoring and going through updated reports.
Very time consuming.
Yeah, and you can link family members as well, because sometimes you can track if someone were to look up a sibling's account, they can then find someone that way. So it just depends on how far you want to go with it.
What if I had 2 Bernese mountain dogs? And
we're done with this conversation. On to Pixel.
Yeah, I had something I wanted to say about the BreachForums, but I can't remember now. Think of it later.
Just put it on your Reddit account, Breach Shamer, and
Yes.
we'll be looking for it.
Yep. Well, we have a third news story to talk about, and this one is the Acropalypse
It's a great
vulnerability.
name.
It's
It
pretty
is a
clever.
good name. It's hard to say, but it's a good name. And so this is a Google Pixel vulnerability that actually allows you to partially recover or edit partially redacted screenshots and images. So this is a Bleeping Computer article that we have. So anytime you crop an image or maybe mask it, like if it's a credit card number, so this was reported to Google in January, and there is a fix out. However, this is the interesting part, that any image that was shared in the past 5 years is still vulnerable to this, and there's really nothing that can be done about it. The fix is only for future images. So the existing ones, it's a little bit concerning. So if you think back, have I used, Google Pixel to
In the
edit?
past 5 years, take a
In the
picture.
past 5 years, have I used Google
Just
Pixel?
last
But
5
I
years.
think that speaks to, I understand why that would be the case. And to your point, Google released a fix for this. I think it was back on the 13th, something like that.
Yeah.
But okay, so from this point forward, you're fine, right? But for that 5-year window, there's nothing we can do. And because we're all nerds, we get that, right? Yeah, there's no way I can make that 0 a 1. That's how the picture was coded. So what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
But that's very concerning for anyone that's taking a picture and cropped it. Like,
Yeah. I mean, cropped it or credit card information, and who knows? I even think about, like, are there services out there that use this to crop images, or I don't know. Like, if you submit credit card information, and it's not only can data be masked, but images can be masked too.
To your point, I think the thing that concerns me, or should concern people, is like, can you go through 5 years worth of things and find information? Like, and for a lot of services, when you submit through, it strips all that metadata, right? Like, if you, I don't know for sure, but we'll assume, popular online forums like Reddit, where people perhaps have used that, markup ability. My assumption is that Reddit is actually stripping out that metadata and posting it in their own thing, so you can't go through and look. However, if you're doing pixel to pixel, perhaps that availability is there, and you can do things. So it's an interesting area. It's going to be fun to find out, and it has other implications, right? Like, not just the ones we're alluding to, but in terms of folks that perhaps work in the intelligence community who've edited things and sent them, or have them
right, you have to crop out the portion markings in the document, so that way you can bring it home. Yeah.
Anyway, enough about what's happening in New York City right now. It's we're not here to talk about that. We're not here to talk about Mar-a-Lago pool houses, regardless.
Well, I'm gonna go get a pretzel when this is over, and but I think it's fascinating, and just that 5-year window. I know we're gonna roll past it. It's. I'm curious if the data generated from that, if you've already have the images, what is it? If the EXIF data is stripped out, right? The metadata is stripped out. Is there a way to process that, through a machine rather than having to go through each image? If that metadata is gone, then it becomes just another image.
Yeah.
Yep. And William posted in the chat also on LinkedIn about the Samsung vulnerabilities. These were a bunch of, I think, 18 zero-day vulnerabilities that allowed basically remote code execution from internet to baseband was, I think, I haven't read too deep into how it all works, but that's another one to check out. So thanks for sharing that one. That was another interesting vulnerability.
And good luck to Jonathan McGee, who's taking his test for Splunk certified user here coming up pretty soon. That's exciting. Good luck there. And our producer had been dropped out for a bit, I assume, because he was checking his Google Pixel frantically. But Ali, if you're ready, I think we'd love to talk about some things coming up soon. If that's on the, there we go. So as always, friend of the show, often our backup co-host, Kirsty Payne, will be speaking at Cyber UK Belfast. And Mick, why don't you go over what we're doing at RSA? You're leading.
Oh my goodness, we are releasing a book called Bluenomicon. It is basically a collection of essays from some folks in the field like Wendy Nather, Shara DeGrepo, John DiMaggio, Jags. Basically, like, if you're a blue team, read this book. And we're doing a bunch of events related to that book signing, release party for it, and then because we're doing that because we didn't get accepted to our talks, Ryan. I think that's the reason why we got pwned in this one.
Make our own book with blackjack and authors.
But we did have a bunch of folks from Splunk that did get accepted to speak, and I'm super looking forward to that. Audra and David Bianco and Dr. Fetterman are all giving 3 separate talks. I'm really, really looking forward to each of those.
Yeah. Yep. I just have to figure out what I'm going to say. So
You just get up there and wing it. You just wing it.
No,
Yeah,
it'll be...
Jackie K explicitly says, "I'm not seeing you, Audra," so she's not interested in your talk.
It's okay.
And then Ali, I think we had a couple other things there about next week. Yeah, so one, if you like this, please go ahead and smash that subscribe button. Splunk.com/surge for our newsletters. This is where we put out a lot of the information about upcoming events. It's also where we put out Wombat Facts, very essential. And then we go into also if there's breaking news cyber events, like we'll be talking a little bit about the CVE later today. When there's things that Splunk can help with, we send that out. So please sign up for that. It also keeps us on the air and keeps our corporate overlords happy, which is really wonderful for us and our longevity. And then also, as we discussed, I think next slide here, we are going to an every Tuesday cadence. So last week, I had the pleasure of speaking with Sergio Caligatrone. I said that wrong, but father of the diamond model, big stan of Mick Baccio, which is wonderful. You can check that out on the YouTube playlist or figure out how to go backwards on LinkedIn, but that's all there. Next week, we have Alan Liska and Shannon Davis. And then the week after that, or 2 weeks after that, we have Michael Haig and Audra. And then we're going to be going live from San Francisco with some of the authors. We have about a year's worth of people already lined up for these deeper one-on-one interviews. And people seem to be really enjoying them with more information, which is pretty fun. So stay tuned for all that. Audra, Mick, did I miss any upcoming exciting things?
No, I think that covers it. It's a lot.
A lot. It's very busy, but the only thing that matters is signing up for those alerts. So,
pretty much, yeah.
Thank you all.
Yes, wombats, exactly.
Wombats, all about the wombats. Yes, Mark, 100%. And young guapa, Audra is so slay indeed. I think that might be our dearly beloved Kelsey speaking from the employment grave. But there we go. Are you guys ready to do a charity countdown?
Yeah,
Sure.
I think so.
All right, Ali, let's roll clip.
And now, Splunk's Cybersecurity 60-second charity challenge. Remember the rules. You've got to get through an entire subject in 60 seconds, or you donate to today's charity of choice. Good luck!
All right, so another vulnerability, another zero-day vulnerability. This one was from Microsoft. If you haven't heard, they patched a zero-day in Outlook that allows for privilege escalation, no user interaction, where someone could potentially impersonate the user. So, obviously a concerning vulnerability. There is a patch out. It's being actively exploited, though, this vulnerability. It's CVE 2023-23397. And there are proof of concept exploits floating around as well. So my question to you, Mick and Ryan, is when we see exploits like this come up, what exactly does this mean for the end user? Because I know we've gotten questions, from customers, for instance, about how do we respond? What should we make of this situation? So
I'll pause for 1 second and point out, I believe today our threat research team is releasing some detections for those Splunk customers on ESCU. Otherwise, you can go to their GitHub and find some of the PRs that they've already released. But I believe we have a detection coming out for this very shortly, if not already. Thanks to the Splunk's threat research team, our internal team that does a lot of the detection. So I'll stop there. But Mick, as the consistent winner, much to my wallet's sadness, you or me?
I think that you should go first as our distinguished overlord. Audra, what charity are we playing for today?
Oh, so the charity that we have this week is the National Center for Transgender Equality. And so this is an organization that's devoted to ending discrimination and violence against transgender people through education and advocacy. So that is the charity.
Wonderful. Certainly timely with some of the news lately. Awesome. Let me get my info here. I wrote something up. I'm kind of prepared.
Whoa.
Hey.
Did you write it or did ChatGPT write it?
Right? That's always the question now.
All right, let's get a timer up there. So the recent CVE was a big deal because no user interaction was actually required to trigger the exploit. Once an infected email arrives in the Outlook inbox, sensitive credential hashes could be contained. As I read about on the Huntress Labs blog site, full credit to them, great work. But let's step back a second. This was an exploit that was released with a patch. So why do you, Mr. or Miss Network Defender, care? Let's go to the exact expert. Let's go beyond the exact exploit. When you see a major vulnerability like this release, how do you deal with it? Do you have a communication plan set up with your executives, with your bosses, with your employees? How do you deal with patches and vulnerabilities that have to be patched sooner than the traditional Saturday and Sunday? Have you thought about the risk to your org? Do you have a risk assessment of your org? How do you explain to your boss that the patch was out, but we chose to wait until Saturday or Sunday because of a change control board because that was easier? As the saying goes, patch Tuesday leads to exploit Wednesday, or as Shannon Davis would say, WWCP CGPTD. What would ChatGPT do?
It's a lot of letters.
That's a very hard one to get out, and I am overcaffeinated.
Awesome. Nick, are you ready?
Sure.
Okay.
Let's spin it up. All right, so there was a nation-state level exploit that got released into the wild. There was a very short dwell time between the exploits. We captured it and the proof of concept. Basically, what that means is the B team got it. The low-hanging fruit was able to leverage this. So if you didn't patch your systems, you should do it immediately. What does that mean to the end user? Honestly, it doesn't really mean that much to you. If you're already doing the right things, if you're having strong passwords, multi-factor, if you're doing your part of it, it's really on those blue teams and those administrators that Ryan mentioned. Now, the impacts of this, why you should care if you've seen about, country X hacking us or hacking country Y, it's because a long-term trickle-down effects of that is what's going to impact you. Things like your healthcare data being stolen, if you were a government employee, that clearance data getting stolen. It's those level of exploits you should be concerned about. But for a day-to-day, there's not much an end user is going to do other than bug your administrators.
So Mick is yelling at me on the back end because he's like, WTF, I thought we said end user. And to me, I'm thinking of the end user being the network defender. You obviously went to probably the more factually accurate end user being the person who uses computer.
Oh, yes. Technically correct.
The worst type.
Correct.
Audra, as the arbitrator of truth, justice, who won this round?
Gosh, that was a tough one. Mick, I like that you acknowledged how it could ultimately impact end users beyond just network administrators. Because I do think that that's one of the big questions with cybersecurity is how does this impact me as an individual? Because no one cares about anything more than that, right? So that's, a strong incentive to pay attention and to respond, quickly if it's something that affects your organization. And Ryan, I appreciated talking about different scenarios that could impede, fixing patching your systems, right? So if it's an exploit a vulnerability that comes out on a Friday, realistically, are you going to get that patched before Monday? Are we talking, Microsoft Exchange, for instance, that's not an easy fix.
I saw on Twitter you don't deploy on Fridays, so it's just...
Yeah. So does anyone have an opinion to help me pick?
No, Audra, you have to pick now.
What does our audience think?
It'll be a couple minutes, but we'll
think?
wait for those chats to come in, which I'm excited by. I don't know. We talked a lot about how we could frame this because we didn't just want to go into the details, right? And one of it was like, how do nation states exploit this? What are we going to see? And I think that's a question like we saw with Hafnium, last February. Even though the patch came out, to your point, Audra, it's so hard to patch Exchange that it was taking weeks, if not months. And I'm sure we saw CISA had alert like a year later saying adversaries were still using it.
And I think didn't the FBI actually go into some systems?
They did, yeah.
To fix it without letting people know.
It was that bad. They worked with Microsoft to basically, patch without consent.
Yeah, patch without consent. That's exactly what happened. Interesting. Well, I think I am just going to pick then, and I am going to choose Mick as the winner. Just because I think end user is an interesting perspective.
It's a streak.
It is a streak. You're doing good. It's there we go. After this, I will donate to the charity, which is wonderful, and it's a perfect segue to our next conversation, which is: do I need employees to work for me with ChatGPT?
It's a perfect segue.
Perfect segue. So what's our... And now we talk about things that just happen to be on our minds with who's ever here, because we made this up before I knew who'd accept my meeting invite. See, ChatGPT couldn't have done that, but it could have picked me as a winner. What's our subject today, Audra?
Yeah, so today we're talking about generative AI, specifically GPT. So there was GPT-4, which recently came out, and that's the most recent generative AI model from OpenAI.
I'm sorry, did you say expensive?
Expensive? What? So this is basically, we're hearing reports that some users are actually able to see other people's conversation histories, like under the history panel on GPT-4. So I guess OpenAI took that function offline. So I don't know if history is still offline, but it was showing up for some people based on some tweets. So, you know, definitely some privacy concerns there. And I think we even had some examples on our own team, Ryan, of seeing information. Yeah. So what do you make of that in terms of, you know, privacy and...
There's a lot of discussion around that, and full disclosure, some people on our team are going to be writing up a blog series coming soon. Watch this space on the pros and cons of things like GPT. But I think people say that, like, there's a lot of concern that, like, oh, I am concerned that my employees will use ChatGPT and that will leak information to this third-party company, which is totally relevant, like totally a reasonable fear. But I would then ask, have you also blocked Google? Right? Like this is not a new thing. Like people putting a specific search query has not gone, you know, that hasn't stopped people for 20 years. People putting stuff into, if you go through the regex 101 or whatever the website is, you can see all the things that people put in. And I've seen like full documents and like job stuff and payroll where people have tried to do regex on these websites or like on that website and put in the whole document and then saved it. It's still there. So I don't think the fear is new. It's just the new vector. I interrupted you, Mick. What would you like to say?
No, I think you're 100% right. I
Good
think,
answer this time, Mick, instead of winning all the time.
We were speaking earlier this morning about Eric Hudgens and the team over at Meta, the online operations kill chain that was developed, you know, we talked about back in November. I threw that link at ChatGPT. I was like, hey, give me the 3 big talking points. Why is this different than the cyber kill chain? And it did a fairly decent job of analyzing it. And it's me throwing that link at it, that document towards it. And I think if you extrapolate that, people are throwing all kinds of information like, hey, figure out my itemized deduction for my taxes this year. The data that's on there is people put whatever they're going to put. And being able to see other folks' data, search histories. I think Shannon's popped up as well. It's concerning, but I don't see it as a long-term problem because the AI will obviously correct itself. That's just what it's trained to do.
Yeah, I always think of Google searches like subpoenas and getting information for like murder investigations to find someone's search history of like.
Wow, you just
that's where my mind goes. I guess maybe I.
Wow.
Is that from like just thinking or true crime podcasts? I mean, your background as a journalist, like
maybe reading too many affidavits, but I just wonder about that. Is that going to be the future of those types of investigations too? Reaching out to OpenAI for chat histories and for criminal investigations. I don't know.
I think it 100% would be. Yeah, it absolutely would be.
The people seemed really concerned that once again, I'm not dismissing any of these concerns. The ChatGPT, OpenAI, they had a thing saying, hey, we're not learning from the data that's getting input. We have our LLMs, large language models, right? If I remember correctly the term, like they're pre-done. Like we're learning things. It's already learned. You're just interrogating it. We're not learning from the questions you're asking. So what's funny to me is the thing that we're now upset about today is the same problem that we've had with the internet for creation, right? It's that metadata is leaking. It's not that the model suddenly had my tax information. It's that people can see the questions that I asked of the model, and that's a very different problem, but it's very relevant. Like it's still the same issues that we're dealing with. So I 100%.
Network segmentation, I think we've been preaching that since 1980, whatever. But it goes back to those simple concepts and principles. I think the data is here to stay, those searches will continue. I think incidents like this, similar to this, may continue, but this will be fixed. It'll be like, oh, hey, look, this was a mistake. This is how he fixed it. If you ask any of the AI language models how to fix this problem, they'll tell you. It's pretty convenient.
I also wonder, ChatGPT, now there's a pill, but it is free. And of course, the rule of thumb is anything for free, you are the product, right? So it's not necessarily that they, well, you have a great day, Jackie. Thanks for swinging by. It's not that the data is being incorporated in the model right now. I am curious to see what will happen in the future, right? Because obviously you want to take these lessons learned. I think it's an incredible team. I think it's a staff augmenter. Like I look at our good friend Shannon Davis, who's kind of become our ChatGPT expert, and like he's doing 3x work.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
I do think some of the concern that I've heard from a lot of folks, well, not more than a couple folks, is, hey, this is being used by bad actors to. The biggest thing I heard was to make phishing emails, better. Mm-hmm. I don't get it, because
it's polishing a gold nugget, right? Like spear phishing is the number one ingress. It's very effective as it is, and I don't
putting
think
a hat on a hat. So
it'll just make it much better. I think, hey, go find everything about Mick Baccio, find out his interests, and write me an email that specifically would give a sense of urgency around clicking on a link. Like it will create a really good email from that sort of back, right? But like I also could have sent you the, hey, I need you to update your password. It's coming from Ryan Kovar, and if you don't do this, I'm going to fire you. And off you go.
I think just those emails would pass Audra's red pen, right? Just
yeah, I think.
Benefit. But spear phishing is still going to be that number one vector, right? I don't see that changing.
Well, I think anything that speeds up the process, right? Because that's one of the issues with network defense as well, is like keeping up with the speed of attacks. We'd had our research on ransomware encryption speeds, for instance, and I could see AI speeding up a lot of things where, we'll have to automate our defenses in order to keep up with the automated attacks. And so I think that's one component too. The thing that honestly worries me the most about GPT-4 is that it's like black box AI. They haven't discussed what was used to train it, right? Like that's very secretive, which to me is interesting, because OpenAI is a nonprofit that has a lot of open source in its
in the name.
Yeah. So OpenAI, I guess, is not all that open. And that's one of the big things with AI is how it's trained, because there can be biases depending on the training set. So.
I will be fascinated. We were talking about this the other week, and for me, I look at Log4Shell as a really interesting use case for this, because one of the things we saw for Log4Shell was it very quickly became obvious that once people realized that there was a vulnerability in Log4j, often when there's one vulnerability, there's multiple vulnerabilities. So by the end of the next week, there were like 6, I think, vulnerabilities that had been discovered. And that was pre-GPT being used. Now I'm curious, the big vulnerability was released on Thursday. Most of the world knew about it on Friday. And by Monday, there were new vulnerabilities and new outcomes that could really get going. Now I'm like, would that have just happened on Friday? Like, could I have uploaded hey, here's some JavaScript, or Java code. Can you find all the vulnerabilities that look like this? And I don't know Java super well, but could I have used ChatGPT to accelerate my exploit discovery, right? Not necessarily the exploitation, but
I think 100% you could. If you were able to, if I am a cyber criminal of ill repute and I download source code from one of my ventures, I could theoretically use GPT systems to pretty much mine that source code for vulnerabilities.
Yep.
Yeah, you could.
We have a comment from Weston Wood here. ESL, English as a second language, is a big issue for phishing. Polishing up the language, English just lowers the barrier for more bad actors to be more convincing. See, I agree with that, Weston, but I go back to it's already
number one
ingress
by a lot.
By a lot. And then I have seen people with PhDs in English click on links because of the urgency inside of an email. So will it create a more convincing email? Categorically, yes. is that going to be a game changer? No. And I also hate the fact that we have to rely on users to figure that out. Like if we can use ChatGPT to write more convincing emails, then surely we can also start using ChatGPT equivalents to start finding these emails that are doing X, Y, and Z.
I think if we can use ChatGPT, look, we talk about this a lot, Ryan. You and I being the old graybeards of this bunch. We've been in security for such a long time, and links are still not safe to click on.
Or Clink. Don't Clink them.
We're doing something wrong as an industry that we haven't fixed that, and maybe ChatGPT is the answer to help us fix that problem.
And then we're all unemployed. So.
Well, speaking of unemployment, we did have a conversation earlier about, is this going to be, kind of able to assist with tech jobs, or will it replace tech jobs, right? Like, is this going to be used as a productivity tool, or is it going to mean you need fewer engineers in order to accomplish what
And I think this is the best time to say, people may not realize this, but Audra is on vacation this week. This is actually just completely AI Audra, or Audra, completely convincing, barely noticeable.
Yes, I am not real. This is all programmed.
Well, none of this is real, really.
Yeah, we're all in a simulation. I mean, that's established. But yeah, I don't know. I kind of wonder. I was reading, so the World Economic Forum has a Future of Jobs report, because we were talking about this, and I was really kind of concerned.
Is that in Geneva?
Yeah, about what does this mean? How many jobs is AI expected to replace over the next several decades? And what does that mean, for job creation? And so they estimate that 85 million jobs will be displaced by the year 2025 across 26 countries. And they're also predicting 95 million new jobs will be created. But the other thing too is, would that deepen existing inequities when you look at the type of people who will be the most disadvantaged are, low income jobs, right? Those are most likely to be automated. And so what does that mean for upskilling, right? What does that mean for being able to fill the new jobs? Because we already hear in cybersecurity about millions of open positions that they can't fill. I wonder if that's going to spread to other industries where companies are unwilling to invest in development of their workers and hiring, entry level, and we'll see all those same problems. It'll just be widened because of all these more technical jobs.
I'm glad I'm almost ready to retire. I was like, there's a couple things I never want to do in my career. I never really want to learn how to use regex, and now thanks to ChatGPT, I don't have to.
You never have to.
I don't want to have to bother learning IPv6. That's not going to happen before I retire. And now apparently I just need to have a job in the future of managing my AI bots, like AI Audra and Mac AI. It's going to be solid.
Yep, basically.
There we go. Well, thanks. Happy Audra, as always, ending on the high note for the day.
Very high note.
Super positive. Well, it's something that I actually am very curious to see how that plays out. I do think that probably one of the most important skills to have for the future is just adaptability, right? Like should be priority number one.
We have a lot of
Reskilling on
people
the fly,
new to
is what we're
cyber.
saying. Is that what Audra?
We have a lot of people who are fairly new to cyber who watch this show. I will say one of the most important skills that I've had in my career for the last 15 years was how to Google things and how to acquire information very quickly. And I think if there's one thing I'm learning very quickly with ChatGPT is being able to write prompts to effectively go through information is going to be very key. Parker Ramney just said AI is a tool. I agree with that. I think it can be used both ways. And I think knowing how to use that tool is going to be super essential. But don't over rotate on one tool or the other. There's a lot of new GPT sort of things coming out. And with that, I think we're pretty much at the end of time. So.
Yeah, we've almost been talking for an hour, so we should probably stop.
I know.
Fine.
We're over time.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I know we went a little over, but this has been a fascinating conversation for everything. And it's fun to see the interaction. We always appreciate that. So we will be back next week, same time. That will be Shannon Davis and Alan Liska, the king of ransomware from Recorded Future, with a great conversation. And then the week after that, we'll have another coffee talk and in perpetuity. So every Tuesday, like I said, sign up for the newsletter. Find us on YouTube. That's the easiest way to find all the
subscribe button
playlists.
somewhere.
Yeah, smash that, subscribe. We don't have one. We should get one. We should chat GPT, make a subscribe
Yes.
button. Thank you, everyone. And Ollie, take us away.